Dominoes, starter level. A Pretty Face by John Escott. Read by Jennifer J. Myers. Copyright Oxford University Press, 2003. Chapter 1. Zoe is angry. Zoe is 17 years old. She works in a bookstore in the little town of Newport. Zoe likes books, and she likes her work. But after work, she likes to act in plays with the Newport Players. The Newport Players do 6 plays every year, and Zoe is in most of them. Some plays are exciting, and some plays are famous. This week, the play is Romeo and Juliet by William Shakespeare. A lot of people are coming to see it, Zoe thinks. I must act well. Mike is 18 years old. He is a student at Newport College, and he likes writing. One day, he wants to write plays for the theater and for television. One day, I want to be famous, he thinks. Newport has a newspaper. The Newport Weekly News is its name, and Mike's Aunt Peggy is the editor. One morning, she phones Mike. Do you want to write a review of Romeo and Juliet for the newspaper, Mike? She asks him. The Newport Players are doing the play tonight at the little theater. Yes, please, Aunt Peggy, Mike says. Thanks for asking me. That evening, he goes to Newport's little theater to see the play. Mike goes into the theater and sits at the front. He gets out his notebook and pen, ready to write notes for his review. There are a lot of people in the audience. 5 minutes later, the play begins. Zoe acts the part of Juliet's mother. She knows all her words and speaks them well. Mike is watching her. She's very pretty, and she's doing her best, he thinks. But it's not easy to act the part of an older woman. She's only 16 or 17 years old, and we all know it. He begins to write in his notebook. 2 hours later, the play ends, and the audience leaves the theater. Mike goes home and writes his review for the newspaper. He doesn't feel very happy. It was a good play, but what can I say about the girl acting the part of Juliet's mother, he thinks. I want to be kind, but I must be honest, too. At the bookstore on Friday, Zoe reads Mike's review of the play in the Newport Weekly News.
And Zoe Baker acts the part of Juliet's mother. She has a pretty face, and she speaks her words well. But she is a young girl in an older woman's costume, and we all know it. She can never make me believe differently.
Zoe is angry. She looks at the name under the review. Mike Morrison. Who is this Mike Morrison? She thinks. What does he know about acting? Chapter 2. Zoe has an idea. On Tuesday evening the next week, Zoe and her friend Annie are drinking coffee in the Newport Cafe. Annie is a student at Newport College, and sometimes in the evenings she and Zoe meet at the cafe. Suddenly, Zoe sees a boy sitting at a table across the room. "Who's that boy?" she asks Annie. Annie laughs. "Do you like him? He has a nice face," she says. "His name's Mike. I often see him at the college." "Mike?" Zoe says. "Mike who?" "Mike Morrison," Annie says. "That's Mike Morrison?" Zoe says. She is furious. "Yes, why?" Annie asks. "He writes reviews for the Newport Weekly News," Zoe says. "That's right," Annie says. "His aunt is the editor. Oh." She stops suddenly and looks at Zoe. "The review of Romeo and Juliet." "Right," Zoe says. "Do you remember it? Zoe Baker acts the part of Juliet's mother. She has a pretty face and she speaks her words well. But she is a young girl in an older woman's costume, and we all know it. Nice face or no nice face, I hate him." Annie laughs. "Okay, go and tell him," she says. "Go and say, 'I hate you, Mike Morrison. You write stupid reviews for the newspaper. Go on.'" But Zoe isn't laughing. "Yes, all right," she says furiously, and she begins to get up from her chair. Then she stops suddenly. "What's wrong?" Annie asks. "Are you afraid?" "No," Zoe says. "I have a better idea. Does he come into this cafe often?" "Every Tuesday and Thursday evening, I think," Annie says. "He has a writing class at the college, and he comes here after it finishes." Zoe thinks for a minute or two. "That's very interesting," she says at last. "Is it?" Annie says. She looks across at Mike Morrison, then at Zoe. "Why is it interesting? What are you thinking of doing?" Tell me, am I a good actress? Zoe asks. Yes, you are, Annie says. But, okay, Zoe says. I'm a good actress, and I want to prove it to Mr. Mike Niceface Morrison. How do you want to do that? Annie asks. Zoe smiles and begins to tell Annie about her idea. Chapter 3. A Difficult Interview. On Thursday, Mike comes to the Newport Cafe after his writing class. He asks for a cup of coffee, then starts to read one of his books. Some minutes later, a woman comes into the cafe. She is carrying a magazine under her arm. At first, Mike does not see the woman. Then she comes across to his table. "Hello," she says. "Are you Mike Morrison?" Mike is surprised. "Yes," he says, "that's me." The woman smiles. "Can I sit at this table?" she asks. "Yes, of course," Mike says. "My name is Kate Lawson," the woman says. "I'm the editor of Yes magazine. Do you know it?" She sits down and puts the magazine on the table in front of Mike. "Yes, I know it," Mike says. "It's a magazine about famous people." "That's right," Kate says. "Do you want to write something for it? Can you do an interview for me?" "An interview?" Mike says, surprised. "Why are you asking me?" "You sometimes write theater reviews for the Newport Weekly newspaper," she says. "Is that right?" "Yes, I do," he says. "I want to write plays one day and—" "Well, do this interview for my magazine then," she says. "It's with a famous playwright. He lives in Newport." "Todd Marin is the only famous playwright in Newport," Mike says. "He lives quietly and doesn't go out very often. And he's famous for not talking to reporters from gossip magazines. He throws them out of his house." Kate laughs. "Are you afraid?" she says. "Good reporters aren't afraid to do difficult interviews. You want to write plays, don't you? Well, perhaps he can tell you something about playwriting." Mike thinks, "She's right. Perhaps I can learn something from Todd Marin." "Okay," he says. "When can I do it?" "Tomorrow morning," Kate says. "You must tell Marin this interview is for Yes magazine, but tell him after you get into the house, okay?" "Okay," Mike says. End of Side 1.